Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to MaxTESOL. And just a gentle reminder about the title of my session. That session talks about one of the most famous exams around the world, and it's Cambridge exam called IELTS. I'm sure that many of you have gone through the exam, or maybe your kids, your children, I don't know, but actually IELTS has become kind of very popular around the world. And this makes IELTS a kind of a very rich teaching material. It's not just preparation for the exam. Actually, it could be a very good way of improving students' awareness of linguistic features and cultural aspects of the English language as well. And that's why, being in the field for 20 years, I kept thinking about what could attract the attention of students, especially that I'm based in Egypt. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Arab world or not, but sometimes we really need to motivate learners, and student motivation is quite difficult in the Arab world because some students think that English is so challenging to them, and that Arabic language with the first language interference makes their pronunciation kind of difficult to understand. And this makes the whole process of learning like a journey of challenges and a journey to success. But at the same time, it's full of hurdles and obstacles. Let me first start by welcoming everyone to this session. And for your information, of course, once again, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Mohammed Khalil Musa. I'm a PhD holder in the field of English language and literature. I don't know if you've read the bio or not, but my area or expertise is mainly assessment. And the title of my session today, which is going to be very short to the point, is Teaching IELTS for Cultural and Linguistic Awareness. Once again, here is my name: and academic consultant, English instructor, IELTS trainer. I was the former president of MaxTESOL, and this is my email address, mohammed.musa@aucegypt.edu. If anyone is interested in getting the presentation, you can just email me, and this is my phone number. And if you are calling from this is my WhatsApp. If you're calling from outside Egypt, you can simply add 002. So, you know, from the title of the session, we're talking about the basics of learning the language and raising awareness about the linguistic features. But let me first remind you that IELTS is either academic or general. IELTS is from Cambridge, and it's provided by IDP and the British Council, and the exam is 4 skills. In other words, when we talk about IELTS, we're talking about speaking, writing, listening, and reading. And this is something that all of us as teachers want our students to go through. We want them to experience and to practice all 4 skills at the same time. But the problem is that students could maybe not very much motivated. They get sometimes very bored in the general English courses, saying, okay, talk about yourself, talk about your future dreams. Sometimes general English courses make the whole situation quite boring. That's why I thought about something called assessment-based learning, or ABL. ABL means that you use IELTS to attract learners' awareness of the importance of linguistic competence and improving the language, as well as the cultural background as well. Once again, how can that be done? Simply, instead of providing them with something like a placement test, they have to know that IELTS in itself is not just a material for learning English, that this exam is actually a placement test. This exam wants to change language from a number or from the spontaneous overflow of ideas, like what William Wordsworth, the Romantic poet, said once about poetry. We need to change language from the spontaneous overflow of grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation into something calculated, something measurable. And when you explain this to non-specialists of language or even learners, they become so excited. You know why? because many of our learners have got this mathematical mind. They want to know, how can I measure my success in language? The first feature of linguistic awareness is explaining how IELTS actually classifies the proficiency of language according to the Common European Framework of Reference, known as CEFR. So it's very important right from the beginning to inform the students that I'm going to do kind of a placement test, and it's very important for you to be able to know your level and to know your steps and your journey of learning a language, where you stand, where you aspire to reach. And by the way, this is a very direct message to all teachers and trainers of assessment. You can always use assessment as a form not only of teaching language, but also to tell them the fact that language needs time. According to Cambridge, sometimes we need 200 hours to reach from band 5 to band 7 IELTS. Students have to be aware of that. Students have to be aware of the linguistic features, that in order to be able to go through all this, you must go through a placement test, and you are now level 4, you are band 4, which is A2, you are band 5, which is between B1 and B2. Sometimes it's important to turn the learner from simply a passive recipient into almost an expert in language. Why don't you just do that? Why don't you just raise the awareness and the professional awareness and the language awareness? Especially that it's important to tell the students right from the beginning that if you want to go up in the level of IELTS, you have to know the components of language. IELTS will help you know that language is vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. And according to Cambridge, if you want to improve your vocabulary, it's very much similar like improving your vocabulary in general English courses. So instead of wasting time and providing very hectic and boring courses in general English about vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation, and this is a very obsolete way, let's turn to Cambridge style or IELTS specific style in teaching vocabulary. Like, for example, avoid the repetition by providing synonyms, by knowing the difference between the formal and the informal, by knowing more about the collocation, by watching the spelling mistakes. And this is something quite important. We usually do all this in general English courses, but through IELTS, students' language awareness goes up by knowing that there is something called collocation. You cannot simply say, I want to grow children, it's raise children. And I believe that teachers should tell the students how to get the information, not just tell them the information. Why don't you provide them with a mobile-friendly website like Collins Dictionary, or maybe Oxford Collocation Dictionary? When we talk about grammar, the very old style of teaching grammar is almost old-fashioned. And the beautiful thing that modern learners in the 21st century no longer tolerate the traditional ways of teaching grammar. And surprisingly, some students are aware that the teaching methods of giving grammar or teaching grammar have been modernized. So if they find a teacher giving them grammar for the sake of grammar in rules with the keywords that help them identify the present and the past simple and all that very old style, they can tell them, I believe that there could be other more interesting features and methodologies of teaching grammar. For example, why don't we just study grammar through IELTS? Because according to Cambridge, grammar is not just grammatical accuracy, it's variety. And through the word variety, you can provide the different tenses. So if I ask the student, what do you do, or what's your job? Instead of saying, I work as a teacher, you could say, I've been working as a teacher for 20 years, and I do enjoy this job. And you can actually provide them with the script, and you ask them to spot the grammatical variety. Even when it comes to pronunciation, I believe that students feel so comfortable when you tell them that according to Cambridge, although there is the first language interference with the pronunciation, still, if you are understandable and your accent is easy to understand, then you can score band 8, which is almost near native. And that's why it's important for teachers to play videos of some non-native students from Africa, maybe Pakistan, India, Egypt, the Arab world, and how they score band 8, although there is the L1 interference. By providing them with this kind of piece of information, their linguistic awareness goes up, and this calms them down. And actually, by telling them that L1 does not impede or does not prevent the process of communication, this consoles them, this kind of calms them down and provides them with enough confidence. Wow, I'm so confident that now I know that I can have my own Egyptian English accent, but still I can get a high score. For your information, IELTS is not just for language awareness. The funny thing about IELTS, that IELTS sometimes is used also for cultural awareness. Let me give you some examples about that. It's through understanding the techniques of IELTS that you actually attract students' attention to some cultural aspects in the Western culture. For example, I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but in the IELTS speaking, we've got 3 parts. And there is one specific part, which is part 2 and even part 1 and part 3, where you have to provide something that sometimes in our Oriental culture we don't frequently use, which is the power of examples. I always tell my students that if you ever want to get a high score, you have to support your answers with evidence. Evidence could be concrete examples, could be personal stories, could be names of brands, celebrities, countries, or nations. So the very theme, or the very fact that some students in the Arab world are not fully aware that the Western culture, which had generated the IELTS, is not very emotional or very generic in the way of thinking. This is something we have to know in critical analysis, that sometimes we have to be very logical and rational. And I think many scholars have outlined the fact that academic writing, or even academic speaking or formal speaking, is very much like a sandwich. You provide your impressions, your ideas, but you have to consolidate your ideas and feelings or emotions with real examples, and then you end up with conclusions of final messages. So if anybody tells you something like a very simple question, like, okay, tell me about your favorite cuisine, that's IELTS speaking. Don't provide general sentences. Don't provide just general answers by saying, I love Italian food. No. Usually in the English culture, you've got to be very kind of logical. You try your best to convince the others. And this is something cultural, because when we did a discourse analysis of some English texts, or written English texts written by Egyptian students, we found out that they tend to generalize. In other words, I like the Italian cuisine. It's nice, it's delicious, we all like it. But they never pinpoint the reason and the rationale behind their ideas, the motifs. So that's why the cultural aspect, that if you are preparing students to study abroad through IELTS, you can help them with the idea that when you talk, provide evidence to be convincing. There is a huge difference between the idea and the impression. There's a huge difference between a logical idea and just your emotions. So I like the Italian cuisine because it's affordable and it's delicious as well. For example, I like the pasta and the pizza. You can always train the student's mentality to provide something called the flip side of the idea by saying, however, Italian cuisine still, the food is so full of calories. And if I'm going on a diet, I have to shy away from eating such meals. So once again, it's developing critical thinking, cultural awareness, and linguistic proficiency, of course. So, because if you're teaching IELTS just to help the students get the score, I believe you are not, not appreciating the power of IELTS as an exam which is widely used by many universities, or as an entrance to immigration to many countries like Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. So that's why you've got to use the best of IELTS. Another example as well, even with the IELTS listening, some teachers just play the listening and tell the students, hey guys, listen, complete the answers in 30 minutes, transfer the answers in 10 minutes. Okay, that's beautiful, but you can't see the different layers within the culture itself, within listening itself. In other words, have you noticed that in IELTS listening, when students in part 3 listening, when students discuss things with their professors never say, no, I disagree. They never say that. But they usually say the British way, the Western way of politeness, which is a feature in discourse analysis. How you break down the phrases of politeness by saying, I totally agree with you, but what about? Actually, when you attract the students' attention of phrases of politeness, they use them after that when they travel. They can employ such phrases in their discourse after that when they immigrate. IELTS is not just an exam. If you please read the script of the listening, you'll find very nice expressions that reflect the cultural aspect by saying, they never say, no, I disagree. They always say, oh, that's a good idea, but I think that way. What about? But, however, yeah, I agree with you. Or maybe I'm afraid I disagree, but still, by providing them with these phrases, this is much better to me than providing conversation courses about certain themes that could be boring to learners. My contention is your ability as a teacher to dissect and raise students' awareness to cultural and linguistic features as well, especially that if you just attract their attention as well to the fact that, yeah, I'd like to give you another example, even from the reading itself. I believe that reading in IELTS is quite challenging, especially if students do not read in their actual life. If students don't read, reading is going to be very difficult. However, listen to this. There is one question in IELTS reading which I consider very embedded in the Western culture, and the cultural aspect has to be outlined to learners, which is true, false, not given. The problem is that some students, when they report words about their professors, their colleagues, or anyone in their normal life, when they report someone saying something, sometimes they add their own words. Sometimes they add extra words to what has been actually said. And that's why we've got this cultural aspect of the question not given. Do you know that the not given question means that the sentence can be true, but there are 3-4 words that have been added to the sentence that make it not given. Example, there is one text in academic reading, talking about an African boy who invented a kind of, or brought electricity to his village. I read that part when the governor of his city knew about Kwamba, the African boy, and his discoveries. He brought journalists to interview him. And the question said, the governor brought journalists from around the world to interview Kwamba. And surprisingly, the answer is not given. Although sentence is almost true, the sentence is almost true. However, there are 2-3 extra words in the question from around the world that make it not given. When you attract the attention of the students to the fact that when you travel abroad, or even in your life, when you want to explain something, or report something or report a fact, you have to state the fact as it is. Never add your impressions, never add your extra words. And if you do that, maybe the fact is not given and the truth is lost. Sometimes it's important to give moral lessons, even from teaching IELTS. How you've got to say the truth as it is. If you want to tell your own impressions or give your own feelings about something, you have to say, this is my opinion. So you have to acknowledge the source and how you add your own ideas after that. IELTS, to me, is not simply a way of helping the students to get the band. No, on the contrary, even when the IELTS writing, when I provide them with the topics, I don't provide them with the topics of task 2, which is 250 words, by telling them about the basics of academic writing. That's beautiful. But what about raising their awareness about global issues and cultural issues around the world? By doing this, you're actually using assessment as a window to open their eyes into the wide horizons of the globe, the linguistic, the cultural, the moral aspects. Yes, I believe that teachers, experienced teachers, smart teachers, maybe teachers with a vision, can help the students find their way. In other words, when you teach students and you tell them about the gap year, they come to understand about the importance of interpersonal skills and soft skills, and that the world is not just studying. When you tell the students about global warming, you're actually telling them about one of the main issues around the world, which is the increase in the world temperature and the rise in the temperature and the rise in the sea levels. Number 3, when you tell the students more about social problems like the unemployment, you're actually raising their awareness about economic issues. IELTS can be provided as a way to help students become aware of not just cultural issues, global issues. And that's why I know it all depends on the teachers, but it's very important before you provide them with the techniques to provide them with an intro, an orientation intro from session 1 about the cultural aspects of IELTS. Tell them that IELTS touches upon global issues like children, youngsters, youth, teenagers, education, distance education. You can also talk to them about generation gap, gender clash, employment. Even sometimes we talk about philosophical issues in task 2, especially in the general module exam. For example, happiness differs from one person to another. What's the definition of happiness? All these topics can be raised, help the students develop kind of a critical thinking style, because to them, it's not just about presenting an essay. It's how you present an essay in a logical way and convincing manner. By the way, I want to wrap up my very short session with a story that maybe some students claim that IELTS is only a way to travel or study abroad. And it's your role as a teacher to be a leader, to put them on the right track, to see things differently. The role, as far as I recall, when they asked one of the critics in the 19th century, what's the role of the leader and instructor, he said, it's his ability to provide a fresh view of things. Why don't you provide a fresh view of assessment by telling students it's not just an exam? It could be a lifestyle, learning, listening, reading every day, getting to know about the other cultures, improving your language while learning about other cultures, enjoying the experience. English could be challenging if you're simply teaching English for the sake of the score. If you're teaching English for the sake of just exposing them to lifelong experiences, I think learners would definitely be involved more and more. And they would definitely go on and read more, answer more, and come back to you, because you're no longer a teacher, you're a mentor. And this is very important. There's a huge difference between instruction and mentoring. I remember one student told me once, IELTS to me was a turning point, not because I got the score, but because I've come to know more about the linguistic features and the mechanism of language, as well as the cultural aspects of the Occident, of the Western culture. Once again, if you've got any questions, you can email me or send me a WhatsApp message. And I'm so happy, I'm so honored that you can watch me and watch this session. I'm so happy that I've had the honor of participating. And once again, here is my email address, mohammed.musa@AUC Egypt, and this is my phone number. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you at MaxTESOL Egypt, Cairo, Egypt. Thank you once again, and I wish all my colleagues all the best. Thank you.